All right. Well, welcome to those of us joining us live on YouTube. Thank you for being here with us. And to our special panelists for joining us today, thank you so much. We're really excited about this conversation. So this is a part of our Sports Biz Camps weekly content series. The idea is to start having conversations more regularly in the virtual space. And what better conversation to have today than one around civic engagement and voter education. I'm really excited about the panelists we have here today. They'll introduce themselves shortly. Why don't we just roll right into the conversation? So the idea is that we have an open dialogue, right? We all have our own role in this space around voter education. And so I don't want you to feel married to a structure. Now I've said that before, and we married a structure anyway. Either way, we're gonna have a good conversation. But just by way of introduction, and I'm gonna pick on you first, Jalen. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first to our audience?
Okay, awesome. Yes, so my name is Jalen Mitchell. I am a junior at Howard University. I'm from the Philadelphia area in Pennsylvania. And then I started this initiative called the HBCU Negro League Centennial initiative. So we're trying to celebrate the centennial of the Negro Leagues and really shine the light on the legacy that that organization had in the Black community.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then I'm reunited with a good friend of mine, Dr. Andrew Mac Intosh with RISE. I'll let you do a brief introduction for yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vin. Andrew Mac Intosh. I work with RISE as a part of our education team. RISE, really works to talk about racism and using sport as a platform to end racism, empowering athletes, etc. So really excited to be here. We see a huge intersection between civic engagement more broadly and ending things like racism and racial inequality. So excited to have this conversation.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I've already reversed the expectation, right? Because I say Betsy last, but certainly not least.
Yes, thank you. I'm Betsy Mack, and I'm with the Charlotte Hornets. I'm the executive director of the Charlotte Hornets Foundation, and I'm the senior director of corporate social responsibility for the organization. So besides a very long title, what that means is my department and I lead all of our philanthropic efforts within the community, getting the team involved. And right now we have been working a lot on our social justice platform. We actually just created our focus in that space to be more intentional. While we're not new to these focus areas, we wanted to make sure that we were more purposeful in how we were putting them out in the community. So our 4 focus areas in the social justice platform include racial equity, economic mobility, voting, and justice reform. So that's our current focus right now. And, with great leadership from both the league and within the Hornets, we're able to hopefully impact some change there.
Awesome. That's actually a really good segue for getting this conversation started, specifically around the voting pillar. I know that the Hornets have swarmed the polls, and I know that there was some activity this week. Tell us a little bit about how the rubber meets the road when you're activating against that voting pillar in this new process for the Hornets.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited about Swarm the Polls. Started with our leadership down telling us that wanted to see a focus area there. And then when we started reaching out within the organization, obviously this is an initiative that falls under my department, but we had about 25 different individuals and volunteers throughout the organization, different departments, job levels that all kind of raised their hand and said, we want to help. And so we built out this committee. And so we've been really intentional about how we've been utilizing our staff to really make sure that we're out in the community, we're having conversations, and we're making sure that we're promoting voting and registration. So this week we had a voter registration event where, RISE was involved in helping us to lead that conversation. The arena is going to be a spot for early polling. So we're very excited about that piece. And then, this week was our second week in a row. We're doing it for 5 weeks where we're going into some of our communities that have very low voter turnout. So research shows that areas with high crime rate and high poverty rate typically have low voter turnout, and that's due to accessibility and also education. So we've taken it upon ourselves to go to some of these communities and, post up there for a couple hours and just raise awareness and help have conversations. And while we're definitely not promoting a side to vote for, we just want everyone to use their voice and vote.
Mm-hmm. That's such an important piece of, this movement we're experiencing right now, right? It's such a unique time. And then why not have it happen during an election season? So I think it's great to see the Hornets step up and use their platform, not just the Hornets, but the people in the Hornets organization, right? Because
absolutely,
the arbitrary Hornets itself can't do much outside of, branding and awareness. It's the people willing to go and spend that time in the community beyond the commitment the organization made. I think that's great. So congratulations to you for that.
Thank you. And it's the social capital too, right? It's, our social media following, it's some of our partnerships and the network that we've been able to have and grow, and using, our connections to help to bring these opportunities to individuals that may not have them. So, that's a huge point.
Yeah, I think on that too, Vince, I'd kind of echo a lot of what Betsy is saying about the amplification and the combination of individual and social and organizational capital. We in this moment where I think a lot of people are looking to have a voice. I think voting is a really powerful way to make a contribution and to say something. And also, as you align with your organization, various brands, etc., there's certainly a power in this movement. So really excited about the civic engagement that's taking place. And the agency, I think, overall that's taking place right now in our country.
Also, definitely. And that's also a great segue. Again, Betsy talking about specifically with the Hornets, but Andrew, with Rise, you're able to touch a lot of different organizations, but you're also responsible as an organization for your own platform. So tell us a little bit about Rise and your role in the civic engagement conversation now.
Yeah. And also, so Rise, as I said, our role, we see that as educating and empowering the sports community to end racism. We believe that one day there will be no racism. And when we get there, the sports community and athletes specifically would have been at the forefront of that conversation, of that movement. I think historically we've seen that, so if you think about John Carlos, if you think about Tommy Smith, you think about Muhammad Ali, they've been at the forefront of those things. And you look at the tradition today, you see Patrick Mahomes, you see the Hornets, you see LeBron James. There are so many organizations stepping up and really advocating for change and social equity. So that's what we believe more broadly. I think more specifically, we're interested in voting because we're interested in civic engagement, right? So if you define civic engagement as dealing with social issues, dealing with issues that impact your community, then racism and inequity and injustice are certainly issues that impact us all. And so we're really about how people can learn more about race and racism, but also how do they then take that knowledge, take the skills that we try to empower them to have, and really implement that. And so for us, civic engagement is that. Going out to vote is that. It is putting into action what you have learned, the resources, the capital, psychological, social, and otherwise that you have at your disposal.
Absolutely. No, that's powerful. And I love that. That's such an important void to fill. In this, obviously, there's been a lot of activity, but it just feels like there's so much more awareness around the importance of voting this time around. I mean, from the age myself, I guess this is I'm still under 5 elections, big elections, I should say, because it's very, very important to realize that the presidential election is one of many that happened on a calendar basis. I'm going to come to you, Jalen, and I want you to have an opportunity. Tell us a little bit about the Negro League Centennial, what that does, and how you plan to bring that to life, and where this civic engagement might overlap with that organization.
Yes. So basically what we're trying to do is, bring awareness and celebrate the great organizations at the Negro Leagues that they were, and see the impact that they had on the Black community back in the, early 20th century. But as a team started really exploring that impact, really found that we can't just talk about it from a sports side, talk about it from the impact that it had on the athletic side. We see how ingrained they were in the Black community, how much hope and inspiration they gave to people coming basically right off of the Reconstruction period of the South. And seeing that a real way to really celebrate their legacy is not only bring that education, but bring an empowering arm. So as we're trying to get started out right now, we're using our social media platforms to really try to influence, especially because we're all from HBCU students into, civic engagement, into these conversations about voting, making sure that everybody is registered, aware of, the parties and the different opportunities that they have, and the importance of their voice. So it's really great to see like that overlap between that historical aspect of sport and then how it can, fuel people who are 18, 19, 20, all the way up into really understanding the voice and the power that they have. So that's what we're really trying to do, getting started out over these next couple months.
So I'm making assumptions here. And so rather than doing that, I'm going to clarify, this is going to be the first election that you can vote in, correct?
Yes.
And I'm imagining that's you and your peers. So what's that buildup like for you? And I'll share my own story, which may be a misnomer, but what's that buildup like for you now that you know that you're going to have a role to play in what's shaping up to be a pretty big election?
It's really been interesting because beforehand, I guess prior to coming into college and prior to really this year, I never really thought about voting as important as it was. I was, kind of the mind that it's been a lot of, I guess, hopelessness, and it doesn't really seem to make a difference. So why are people trying to make such a big deal about it? So over the past year-ish, and especially since the whole coronavirus, everything started, I've just been taking that time myself to educate myself on like how important it is to use my voice, how important it is to make sure that the people around me, either young or old, are doing the same thing. And it's a really, I don't know, something that's becoming like really cool, and I'm excited to do, because even though I'm just one person out of millions, in America, I know not only will I be able to use my voice to make a difference in this election that's going to make a historical difference, I'm actually using my platform to tell other people to do the same thing. So it's something that it seems like so many people around my age are becoming so serious about, which is inspiring to see, because we're realizing that it's our generation that's going to be next in taking the power that's in America. A lot of the workforce these days are millennials and younger. So it's our turn to really see what kind of legacy that we're going to start to leave. So people that are around my age, seeing all those people take such a firm stance on this is something that is really encouraging. It really, fuels me, makes me excited, makes me feel like, okay, I'm going to do what I can to influence as many people as possible to make sure that we keep this momentum going.
You talked about using your platform, and that's something that sport business professionals, we're very aware of, right? We understand the responsibility and really the opportunity sports has to use our platform because of our special place in society to drive this conversation and many others specific to social justice. But what I love, Jalen, is that you personalize that. You want to use your platform as an individual. And here you are, a junior in college, talking about using my platform. I think that's so powerful. And I hope that everyone should take that as a takeaway. We all have a platform. In the same way we want to hold athletes accountable, responsible, or at least celebrate when they use it, we should challenge ourselves to use it. So I want to give you kudos and props for that. And I told you I'd talk a little bit about my voting story. So my first opportunity to vote, it was similar to you, Jalen. I was in school at Virginia State University. And I followed, not closely, but it was an election that was impossible not to know what's happening. Barack Obama's first time running for president. And I was the complete opposite of you, Jalen, where I was disengaged and I actually didn't participate. I did not vote. And I'm very, if I could go back, I've actually talked to some students about, like, if you go back to your high school self, what would you say? I changed that. The answer is I would tell him, to vote in one of the most pivotal elections in our history, because your voice matters in this conversation. Now, cleaning up for myself, I've voted ever since. But I think it's very personal, right? Everybody's gonna, Jalen, after this season, you're gonna have that first time voting experience. So I'd love to hear from anyone, just that first time voting experience. How did you prepare? Was there conversations? Was there a big buildup? And you don't have to get to the specifics, but just personally, what was that experience like for you? I'd love to hear from you on that, Betsy.
Yeah, I was going to say, so that was my first election voting as well. And I remember I was in college and it was in Illinois. I went to Illinois State. So, you know, I think it was probably like 8 o'clock or so when at that night when it was my birthday too. It was November 5th. So it was my birthday. And I was like, oh my gosh, please like my wish. Like, probably shouldn't say who I voted for, but anyways, was excited about it. And then it was kind of like this whole celebration, and the whole campus was celebrating because it was history, right? It was our first African-American president, and it was exciting, and we were celebrating, and to be a part of that moment in history, and to know that you voted in that moment was something that, looking back, it's cool. I think that for some people, and I know, like, I've talked to my parents about their first time voting, I think every election is obviously unique, but when President Obama won, we all know it was a moment in history. So to have that be my first election and my first time voting, it was a cool experience. Not to rub it in, I'm sorry. But yeah, I think that overall that's what my memory is. And, you know, for people who are voting for the first time this election, I think it's going to be another big year, as we all know. And so you want to be a part of that moment in history, and you don't want to not vote and then think back, like, what if I would my voice have made a difference? And a lot of times I want to say yes, because how many times has it come down to, like, you know, a few states or a few, you know, votes, or, you know, just interesting statistics like that. I want to make sure that everyone knows that importance. But then after I voted that year, you know, I looked at some of the local elections too, because then I started to dive into, it's not only our national election, but, you know, in Illinois, I think it's very different because it's a very strong state that leans in a direction, where the Carolinas, I know it's a little bit more of a swing state. So looking at some of our local elections, it's important because these local elections help to drive some of those national elections. So I think that's what educated me after that national election. But that was my first voting experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, right, for me, because my elections weren't in the US, so they're very different. So growing up, you know, my dad is a teacher, he's a historian, and if it's one thing you know about teachers, they teach a lot. And being a historian, he taught history, right? So he really impressed upon me, like, the need to go out and vote. The fact that we didn't always have universal suffrage, especially persons of color. And I kind of pushed back. I rebelled. I was like, you know, I don't think it matters. Like, why does it matter, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I probably did that for the first 1 or 2, unfortunately. But then got to a point where I actually had a friend of mine who went to university with me go up for elections. And at the time, I think I was still under 30. So I kind of said to myself, like, I never thought of myself as a leader in that way, but here's a peer of mine who does. Mm-hmm. Just really talking to her and like understanding why she was doing it and what she was going up for and the difference she felt she can make, just really inspired me. I just said to myself, like, what is wrong with you? You know, like, here's somebody who sat in class with you, did the same classes, etc. You have your dad at home impressing this upon you, and you're not seizing this opportunity. So yeah, you know, my mindset definitely changed from then. And I think to Betsy's point, especially as I learned about US history and politics and elections, you have an opportunity, I think, to impact your daily lives in terms of some of those down ballot votes. I think a lot of people zero in on the presidential election, and that's a big one, obviously. But, you know, when your garbage gets collected, who runs your schools, the types of education that are in schools, where your parks are going to be, your day-to-day quality of life, you absolutely have the ability to impact. The votes down ballot could be decided by a couple dozen votes, a couple hundred votes. So to think that your voice does not matter in those things, no, I think you're wrong. You definitely have a role to play there. And, you know, who knows, you can even go up for a position as well as my peer did, as my colleague did. So yeah, no, it definitely matters.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful position. I love that we're able to juxtapose the positions, Betsy, and use our different experiences, because as someone who was disengaged, I was there too when we started to celebrate, and I'm part of the celebration, but there was also that little piece of me that knows, like, I didn't really do anything for us to celebrate. And my personality, sometimes I have to stub my toe in order to learn. And fortunately, this was one of those occasions where I made a mistake in sitting that out and haven't done so since. But Andrew, you talk about the history, and you even talk about suffrage and voter suppression. And I think it's such an important part of this greater conversation. But from your perspective, and I love that it's multinational, your perspective, how important is it that we acknowledge that history as we push during this moment of civic engagement?
I mean, you know, there's a saying, I can't remember who to attribute it to now, but, you know, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that definitely holds true. You know, Martin Luther King, you know, often said that the arc of moral justice is long, and, you know, it bends slowly. It's a long arc. And I think one of the things that we have to understand around suppression is that as far as people have advanced and more people have gotten the vote, there's always been pushback. There's always been a struggle and a fight. I mean, if you think and consider that, you know, the first election in the US in the 1700s, 6% of the population could vote. They were all white. They were all male. They were all over the age of 21. They all had to be property owners. And so, you know, if you think about all of the amendments that have come over time, the 15th Amendment, the 19th, et cetera, they have all been attempts to give more and more people suffrage, but they haven't come without pushback. You know, so the Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, literacy tests, asking people to name federal judges in this, you know, it's kind of crazy, the types of things that have come up. And I think, you know, when you see things that have happened in the lead up to this election, where, you know, you learn that polling stations are closed, you know, just the myths around mail-in voting, etc. So I think there are a lot of things that limit the ability of people to go out and vote. It doesn't seem like it's encouraging more people to vote. And I think that is a huge challenge. And again, it has a lot of shades of the things that have happened historically. So, you know, I encourage people to really look at the history and to really consider that it is an ongoing struggle. And so if we aren't active in making sure that more people can vote and more people can vote more easily, then, you know, we can lose some ground. But the goal is definitely to make sure that you get to a point where more people can vote, and it's relatively easy for them to do so, especially in this pandemic, right? Where, you know, things are just going to be confusing anyway.
Absolutely. Jalen, I saw you come off mute. I didn't know if you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I don't know. He just said a lot of things that I really resonated with, but especially just the last point about, you know, I'm thinking about, as people who are young, we love to see, I see all over social media, different petitions and things like that are trying to make smaller civic change, smaller community changes and things like that. And that's something that's great to see and really encouraging. But as people, it's really important for us to recognize that, you know, the real way that we're going to be able to change things that have to do with voter suppression and things that are happening on a local level is if we're actually in these voting booths making that difference. Because, I mean, a lot of stuff is dealt with from a national level, but things that are making it easier access, you know, in your school district, or things that are what is decided where those different voting places are. A lot of that happens on the local level. So it's really important, I think, to take that ownership, and you look at your history to know that. You can't just know that based off of what you get from a commercial or anything on television. So I think, you know, looking back at what's happened historically and using all those different type of resources is something that is really important. And not only, you know, expanding your knowledge of the importance of it, but expanding your knowledge about the impact of your personal voice.
I love that, Jay. And so a little context on Jalen and my relationship. We met, if I want to say, a few years ago now, before he went through the minor league baseball field program, and we've stayed in touch ever since. His development from his freshman year has been extremely impressive. But even I, Jalen, need to know how you, as a junior in college, and now you're a small business owner with the Negro League Centennial. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to start these initiatives also to move voter activity around with my peer group. Where do you get the time and motivation to just keep adding to this plate? It's impressive, but I want to know just your own approach.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the time goes, it's a lot of, you know, prayer about what I can do, and just making sure I'm diligent with scheduling and all that different type of stuff. And I'm still learning and figuring out how to do it. I think, you know, a lot of times you're highly motivated individuals, you try to put too much on your plate, or sometimes you just crash and have too little. So I'm still trying to find that balance, of course, but the motivation, I don't think it's ever going to be lacking. I am lucky to attend an HBCU, and I think that gives me all the motivation I need just to see all these different people. I mean, not right now since we're online, but usually see all these different people around me, see all the history at, you know, at my university, all the people that I know that have graduated from Howard and different colleges like that. It just motivates me, you know, so much to try to use whatever I can to make that difference, because there are a lot of people before me and a lot of people who are my peers who don't have, you know, a lot of resources, who are just starting out, and we're trying to figure everything out, but they're not being complacent and waiting until opportunities come to them. You just have to go and get opportunities and try to make a difference in what you have. So I think I'm just so blessed to be in that environment where I'm just, you know, soaking up all that inspiration. And it's been great to kind of, you know, start off trying to make my mark, do everything I can, and still trying, you know, find the perfect balance. But I hope to just continue to do more and more to really try to make a difference in this world.
Well, keep it up, brother. Look, you know, I think the world of you. For everybody listening, he's only a junior. You got to give him some time to finish school. He'll be on the job market soon. I know you won't have any problems with that. So bringing the conversation back a bit, we talked about this unique moment in history for social justice, and we're going to get to dig into that a bit more. But we're also in the middle of a global pandemic that some may suggest we could be in for round two, just based on seasonal. I shouldn't say that, right? Because I don't have any evidence, but that's what has been suggested. At any rate, and Betsy, what is adjusting to social distance guidelines and really just adjusting to a new virtual environment we've been pushed into? How does that impact, or really how do you work around that to still encourage civic engagement?
Yeah, so that's been challenging. I know we've seen it throughout our organization. Obviously, our players are about to go into the mini bubble that starts Monday. And, you know, from a civic engagement standpoint, we're still trying to provide back and give back to our community. So it's been very different. We pledged at the beginning of the virus and the pandemic 1,000 volunteer hours from our employees at home, which we exceeded, and we've continued to, you know, do those volunteer opportunities at home. You know, we've looked at other opportunities that we could continue to invest in and be a part of. And so, you know, on the voting side too, we're looking at how the pandemic is going to affect the arena as an early polling site. You know, we have the opportunity of having a large space. So I think that I just got the number. We're at about 38 polls that will be offered at the Spectrum Center, so that's a decent amount. We are all going to have socially distanced space between each poll. They're going to be clean between each use. We can't require masks because it's everyone's, right to vote. And if someone doesn't want to wear a mask, then we can't turn them away in our county, but we will have masks provided and sanitation provided as well. So we're doing the best we can and all that we can, but it's challenging. A lot of these types of events and these types of conversations. But, on the flip side, I think it brings a lot of people together. I mean, we're able to now reach individuals that are all over the country through this platform. And so when this event would have been in a location where we're sitting and we're talking in front of someone, now we're able to talk to people all over the country, which is such a cool opportunity. I know that some members on my team and myself, we've been allowing, certain timeframes in our schedules where we have conversations with college students and talk to individuals in a mentorship perspective on, okay, this is a hard time. Like, how do we see, the job market looking? What advice can we give? What was my career opportunity and experience? And talking through it in that sense as well. So I think, yes, there's been a lot of challenges, but I think also there's been a lot of opportunities. So for any student out there that is, sitting there nervous on not sure where to connect, reach out. People are now tied to their phones, tied to their electronics. And, I've had a lot of people reach out. I know my colleagues have as well. And in this time, I think especially people are caring and, looking at how they can give back more so than maybe in previous times. And, I think, yes, there's challenges, but there's great opportunity as well.
Absolutely. I love that. That's great. Andrew, I saw you come off mute. Go ahead and jump in there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things that we've been doing as well. I think sport has always brought people together. I like that so many sport leagues as well as teams and athletes have been trying to find a way to engage with their communities, right? Trying to find a way, even amidst the pandemic, to play the role in a way that they always have, right? Bringing people together, helping them through challenges, etc. I think, there's been this great conversation around, what is sport? Is sport just entertainment? And I think historically, we've seen that sport hasn't just been entertainment, right? Even politicians have used sport. So if you remember, well, I don't know how many you remember. I'm a little bit older, I suppose. But, I remember the US sent a ping pong team to China and called it ping pong diplomacy. Their sport has been used in so many ways. And so for me, especially, again, a historian, daddy's son, it's been really powerful for me to see sport enter this space, leagues and teams, athletes as well, and really say, hey, in spite of these challenges, we are still a way and a means for us to come together to get better educated, etc. We've also been having a ton of conversation with a variety of athletes and just talking about the role that you can play, all right? The need for poll workers, like, there are shortages of poll workers because most of the poll workers throughout the country tend to be older citizens. And so with the pandemic, if you are a younger person who isn't as much at risk, that's a role that you can play. So there are tons of things I think that we can all do at an individual level. And it's been good to see that athletes and others have been stepping up and educating their communities of influence, essentially, so that we can move forward.
That's absolutely right. And we're going to talk more about this kind of sports role in society. I'm a big power of sport proponent. So I love that you introduced that. We did get a question from our audience, so I'm going to read it verbatim and invite anyone to answer. How can we keep momentum going with our communities, within our communities, as we get closer to election season? We've seen large-scale social justice movements throughout the country, but unfortunately, in a lot of heavily white areas, that momentum and desire to stay engaged and active has wound down. What are some strategies for re-engaging people as we get closer to election? Invite anyone to speak on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I think this is some of what we do. I think the goal is for people to keep talking. So that's one. Having these discussions, I think, is important. The more you have them and the more commonplace they become, I think, the more comfortable people become about them, because when you talk about racism and you talk about inequity, you talk about social justice. I know anti-racism has come up as a huge term recently as well. People get uncomfortable, right? Especially if you're white, especially if you think people are attacking you and accusing you of being a part of racism. So it's uncomfortable, I think, for everyone. But the more you have them, the more accustomed you are of them. So I think that's the first thing. Increase the frequency of having these conversations. You need to have the conversations to move forward. So go ahead and have them. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think, take small steps. I think a lot of times people look at, hey, how can we solve racism? Which is a huge thing. I remember once talking to a professor of mine and really talking about this initiative that I have and why it was powerful and really trying to get it going. And I'm so disheartened. And he used to call me youngster. So he's like, youngster, like, how old are you? I was like, how long has slavery been going on? I would say, well, it started with Christopher Columbus. He's like, how long is that? I was like, 500 years. So he's like, well, why do you think in 50 years you're going to solve something that took 500 years to create? And I took a step back and I was like, wow, yeah, that's true. He said, yeah, your role is to get it to the next generation. Your role is to run your leg of the relay. Let me use a sports analogy. Run your leg of the relay as best as you can. And you make sure you hand off that baton really smoothly to as many people as possible and let them run your leg. Because, if we focus on winning the race, that's not your job right now. Your job is to get it out there. So the other challenge I would give to folks is, what is a small thing that you can do to get the ball moving? How can you make people more aware? How could you start an initiative that brings the community together? How could you, help educate some youth, mentor some youth? Maybe it's one person that you're mentoring. Maybe it's somebody in your own family, a nephew, a niece, a cousin. But all of those things are small steps on the same road, on the same journey. I think sometimes people discount those things.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Andrew. And I don't have anything to add. That's great. I want to, with that question in mind, though, this is something that has been on my mind quite a bit. We are in the midst of what has been called the largest social justice movement in the history of history. So a part of me feels like this importance of voting is an annual thing. It's omnipresent. We should always be aware, but it feels like there should be something special attached to this social justice movement. You talked a bit about it just now with the almost having a strategy, but what's next? The voting season is going to come and go, and the challenges we see in the social justice atmosphere, they've had a way of sticking around. Andrew, when we think about what's next after the vote, and I know that Rise is active in that conversation as well. What do you see as the coming next after that?
Yeah, obviously, I think that there are many things that many folks would be interested in. And I know for us at Rise, especially, it is about racism, right? So that's our main mission and focus. And obviously, there's a huge intersection and overlap with a number of other issues, right? So, as you think about COVID-19, there are disparities are along the lines of race in terms of who is impacted, who gets ill, who's dying from that. There are disparities in terms of education. There's disparities in terms of housing. So I think race intersects with a lot of things. So people can be passionate about any of those things. But from a social justice perspective, I think it is, for me personally as well, really about getting people to care more and listen more. I think, the society obviously has a number of challenges. It's a great society, I think, the bones of it, but the ways in which people interact with one another can be improved. And so, if we start listening more, we are more empathic, we are more, I think, working on ourselves, our reflection, our biases, quite frankly, I think we have an opportunity here to really shift the society. And those biases build up into the systems and institutions that make up the society, right? So I think we also have an opportunity to look at those systems, those policies, those institutions, and say to ourselves, how can we correct them or shift them? So, the election for me is almost like game day, right? You can show up, you need to show up on game day, you need to execute to win, you need to do that. But civic engagement for me personally is about the things you do every day. So if I think about Jalen and understanding his story, he's doing this every day, right? He's really motivated. He's getting up in the morning. What are the meetings I'm having? What are the conversations I'm having? How am I understanding those issues? That's like being in the weight room. That's like watching film. That's like making sure you have the good nutrition. You're putting in a good night's sleep, so that when you do have to go out and vote with, when you do have to take a stand on particular issues, you have the information at your disposal and at your fingertips to execute. If you don't go in the weight room, those types of things, then it's challenging to go out and execute sometimes. So building skills, I think building awareness, those are things that we need to continue to do, and shifting policies that exist. I think that's going to be important.
That's so true. And I was actually on a horn with a political strategist before this, and we had an hours-long discussion, got really passionate. And one of the things that he shared with me when I asked that question was that you got to vote a strategy. A lot of times, in order not to lose momentum after the election season, we've got to have a strategy for what happens next. And that can revolve around engaging the people in your community who win said elections or who are responsible for said decisions. A lot of times I think those folks are left off the hook, and not that we should be, not that they should be bombarded, but they should be met with expectations from the constituents they serve. In whatever community you live in, that's you. You're the constituents. So, but with that in mind, the social justice movement, and Betsy, Jayla, I want to hear from you as well. Just how has this movement impacted you personally and professionally? It's been a conversation that none of us have been able to avoid, and avoid's not the right word, but we're having it in a way that society has never encouraged before. So just want to hear a little bit about the personal and professional impact that's had for you.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and go. So personally, I think it's a lot of education for me personally. I mean, I'm white, and so learning a lot about individuals that look differently from me or were raised differently from me, or looking at our African American communities, our Latino communities, our Asian American communities, looking across the board to see how I can learn more and continue to educate myself, and having tough conversations. I feel very fortunate that I have a very diverse group of friends. I have a very diverse workplace environment. We are the only professional sports team that has a majority owner that is African American. And also when we're looking at the league, our team is a leader in having the most diverse senior leadership team. So that is something we're really proud of. And so for me personally, I continue to educate myself and continue to learn about situations that I've never experienced and probably will never experience, but how I can help to gain that education and then have those conversations, which I think is important, even some of the tough conversations, and then a lot of reading. I know there's a lot of great books out there. One of the ones that I just finished reading was The White Fragility. So, that's a great book to read as well for anyone who, is also white, but wants to learn more. And even for individuals that are diverse, I think that's a great book also. And then professionally, like I said in the beginning, the Hornets have been a part of social justice initiatives for quite some time, since 2016, when we saw the shooting of Keith Lamont Scott. We, really dove into that space in a strategic way, but not in a way that, maybe called attention to it as much as we're doing now, which is why we've pivoted and said, this movement, this moment is something that we want to make sure people know we stand for. And so with our newly created social justice platform, it's not groundbreaking new first time events. Some of them, this is what we have been doing. This is our core value. This is, who we are and who we stand for as an organization, but we need to be more intentional about how we're putting it out in the community and showing that we do stand for these social justice issues, and we're not going to stand against individuals. So that's how we've been really intentional about our approach. And after voting, which was one of our 4 focus areas, we're very intentional about our next step being economic mobility. So in Charlotte, we were ranked 50th out of 50 in social economic mobility, which for those who don't know means that whatever really income level bracket you were born into, chances are in Charlotte, when ranked across some of the largest cities, we ranked last. So chances are whatever income level you're born into, you're going to stay. So, our less fortunate individuals are staying. And so why? What are those social deterrents that are keeping our individuals in these situations, and how can we help to provide additional resources? And so that's why that's our next focus. Following that will be our justice reform. Looking at our racial equity, we've decided to take that focus area and use that as almost a lens. And so any event that we're doing, any initiative activation, we want to make sure that we're looking at everything through a racially equitable lens, and make sure that it's not something in the background, but we're looking at it and saying, are we looking at this in a way that we're bringing everyone up together? So our week of service this year, what we did is we honored and featured our local Black-owned businesses to say, let's take a look at what these restaurants are doing and support them in a very different, unique way. And also we participated in CLT Gives Black on the 28th of August, which is a huge day. There's so many things that happened in history that, we wanted to be a part of and promote that out as well. And so the racial equity lens that we're looking through within all our events is something that we're going to continue to be very intentional about. So while voting may come and go after this election, we'll continue to look at local elections, but then we're going to be very intentional about our social justice platform and not let it be a phase, because we need to make sure that this social justice, momentum that we have isn't one that, we try on with the season and then, come next year, we're sitting here with the same issues. But we can, look back a couple seasons from now, still in this movement, saying, look how far we've come, look where we're at now.
Yeah, I think, just to echo a little bit, social justice is about equity. And so, what we should be concerned about, I think each and every one of us, is how do we make sure that that is built in to our compass each and every day. And if we do that, I think we will want to be more socially engaged, because we will want to give back to our communities, right? Because civic engagement and social justice means I care more than just me. I'm looking outside myself and saying, how can I build up what is around me? And so if we have that focus, I think it's going to be super powerful. It's what we need for sure.
And so just kind of going off that too is, educating our community and ourselves on the difference between equality versus equity, and realizing that sometimes to be equal, it's looking at it in a different scope, because some individuals aren't at the same footing as others, and knowing that that's where you look at it in an equitable stance.
Yep. That's super powerful. And I think, as we teach that, because that is our concept that I think there's a lot of debate around. But as we teach that, people who have children, what I say to them is, do you treat both your children the same? And most parents would say, no, I don't. And why not? Because they're different individuals. Now, does it mean that the same rules don't apply to both of them? No, the same rules do apply, but your tolerance around those rules, how you approach them, how you discipline, etc., is going to be varied, because, you have two very different individuals. And so it is a very similar notion, I think, from a societal standpoint. That's a great point, Betsy.
That is a great, and I love that comparison too, because that's something that across the board, parents certainly can connect and understand. But I'm 100% with you. I was thinking to myself to almost say I'm anti-equality. I don't want to brand myself that way, because that's not a good thing. But equality and equity are certainly not the same thing. And equity is needed right now. We need to really dig in on that conversation, both contextually and actively. So Betsy, I want to ask a power sports question, but you've been in the community focused world for the majority of your career, and now you've been doing so in sports. Has there been a difference, and what is that difference now working in the sports world?
The platform. And some of the other organizations that I worked for, they were more, corporate focused. So in the technology space and then in the nonprofit space. And in the nonprofit space, we just had so many limited resources. You wore so many hats and your hands were tied so many times. But now in sports and, in the league that I'm in with the NBA, there's so much power in making a statement and having your players and having your, ownership team and leadership team, stand behind these tough conversations sometimes and these movements. You see a very different response, and it's so powerful. And while the work is similar, the opportunities have grown exponentially because doors are opened in different ways because people want to align with, a sports team more so than they may want to align with a technology company, unfortunately. So with that comes, great opportunity, but also, you need to stay true to your values and stay true to what you want to stand for. And, it's pretty powerful, but it's pretty amazing too. But it's getting to know our individuals within the league also, and letting them shine and letting them be a part of the message and letting them lead it in their own way that they feel comfortable. Because some of the things that we do from a league, we want to make sure that our players feel comfortable and they, respect it and understand it. And so some of it's an educational piece too, but it's really cool what we can do in sports.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Look, I'm a huge pusher of the concept of the power of sports. And even as I sit here and think, I think most of us are encouraged to live in bubbles, maybe not because we want to, but society kind of pushes us to live in a bubble. And especially once you get through K through 12 in college, if you choose to go, in the workplace, there's not a lot of opportunity to experience outside of your bubble, then insert sports. And now we have it. But I also think that the power of sports can't be assumed, and it kind of lies dormant when we don't activate it. So we'd love to hear from Jalen and Andrew to build on Betsy's answer, especially, recognizing that unique platform. What do we make of the role of sports, not just in civic engagement, social justice, but just generally as social institutions when we have these conversations?
Yeah, I'd definitely say, sports are always at the forefront of the conversation. It should be. And as we look especially at the way the world is moving today, it's just such an online and social media and technology-based space. It's not even becoming so much about the sport itself, about football, about basketball, about tennis, whatever. You're talking about the athletes themselves and seeing how much power these individuals have. I think LeBron James has basically as much reach as Donald Trump, it seems like, when you're looking just at the technology and media space as a whole. So it's really interesting and important for sports to be on the forefront of every conversation because, like we're all alluding to, there's a connection piece between everybody in society. It doesn't matter, what you look like, who you are, what your beliefs are. On a Sunday afternoon at an NFL game, you could still high five somebody and cheer for all cheer for the same team. So it's something that unites people in such a unique way. So it's important for athletes and people who are working in sports really understand that potential. I think a lot of times, like you said, about lying dormant, it's because we don't think about that potential that we have. And we're not thinking about our potential. It gives us an opportunity to be lazy and kind of just let something sit. But when we're thinking about the potential impact that we can have, it gives us a whole lot more motivation, a whole lot more focus on this space. That's why I think this social justice movement has been so successful, because during those couple months where we were all at home, these athletes had an opportunity and these organizations had an opportunity to really reflect on the state of the world right now and thinking how much change there's going to be post COVID-19, and really put their foot down and say, okay, I'm Jalen Brown, and this is my opportunity where I'm not just going to be the Celtics basketball player. I'm going to go back to my home city and lead these marches. Or say, I'm Naomi Osaka, and I am not just going to be an amazing tennis player. I'm going to be somebody who's leading the voice, talking about social justice for all these people who have been, killed by police. I'm going to be part of that change for that system. So when you really understand and recognize that potential, it gives sports just so much more power, because it's something that we all are aware of, that unity, but then it's something that you can just use to make some of the biggest change in the world.
Yeah, to just piggyback off of that, I think it boils down to relatability. We can relate to athletes. There's 30 to 40 million youth who play sport in this country annually. So most of us have been on a team in some form or fashion in our life. So when we see athletes out there, I think in some small way, we identify ourselves. And to have persons who've made it through, who can then speak to the issues that impact us in the same way, I think is powerful. I think Naomi has been a really good example of that. But there are a lot of others who've done that as well. When you have somebody like LeBron go back to his hometown, set up a school, make sure that all of the kids are provided for, it's because he's been there and he's lived that and he understands that. Sport has been, Betsy was just talking about, people in that city kind of remaining in their socioeconomic bracket. Sport has been an opportunity for many to move out of impoverished conditions. And so, we can relate a number of times to those sporting heroes, and we relate to the sport as well. And so sport is one of the reasons why I think it's such a powerful platform. The other thing I want to just share quickly too, to your point, Vince, about, sport kind of remaining dormant. I think we've all had good experiences in sport and we've had bad ones as well. And so Betsy talked a little bit earlier about being intentional. Coaches, athletes, organizations need to utilize it. They need to leverage it. It's there, but if you don't activate it, it could be used for both good and bad. I think it was Martin Luther King kind of has a quote around time, and us just kind of waiting on time to just cure all ills, cure all evils. It's not going to happen if we just sit and wait. And so sport, I think, is the same thing. It can make a difference, but we have to seize it. We have to use it. We have to put it to good use.
100%. And I've come to that realization more and more over the years. And I'm also committed in my own personal and what I do professionally to be sure that we are activating that power and using it for good. So, coming up on time and wanting to recenter the conversation back to voting, 30 seconds or less to take us home. Would love to hear from each of you. When it comes to voter education, what's the one thing that our listeners need to keep in mind? Betsy, we'll start with you.
I would say educate yourself. Don't just look at the presidential election. And then key dates to know. So you need to be registered by October 9th. And so that is in North Carolina. I don't know if we have people outside of North Carolina, but in North Carolina, it's by October 9th. If you're not in North Carolina, then check out your state. But National Registration Day is September 22nd. So if you haven't registered yet, please do. But yeah, just educate yourself, be a part of it. Don't think your voice doesn't count, because it does. And we need everyone to get out and vote.
Andrew, one key thing for our listeners to remember.
Yeah, I would say definitely have a plan. Decide now. Don't wait until the last minute. Decide. Are you gonna go absentee? Are you gonna go in person? What time are you gonna go? Where is your poll? How are you getting there? Like, all of those things are important for you to know and execute it. So like anything else, have a plan, make a decision early on, and go out and execute it. It's not good enough just to be registered. You actually have to go out there and exercise your right as well. So make sure you have a plan for both things.
Last word, Jalen Mitchell.
I think they both hit on the most important things: education and execution. So that's definitely what I say. You have to be aware of what's going on, aware of how you can get involved, aware when you need to register, and then, you know, have a plan to execute. You need to know, you know, the absentee, know everything that you're going to do beforehand. So just don't wait until the last possible minute, and be ready to use your voice. Understand that this is a power that you have, a privilege that you have, and use that.
Absolutely. I can't thank you all enough, not just for being here today, but for what you're doing, using your platforms, using your organization's platforms, and making a difference in this conversation. So thank you. Continue to do good work. If you have questions around voting, www.vote.org is where I go. If you've moved around a bit like me, you may not even know where you're registered to vote. You get all the information you need there. You can get everything situated. So panelists, thank you so much. Audience, thank you for joining us. Everybody, enjoy your night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Right.